Not only did you cut short 3 lives and cause lasting damage to Ian Wilkinson's health, thereby devastating the extended Patterson and Wilkinson families, you inflicted untold suffering on your own children, whom you robbed of their beloved grandparents.
Case 1. Erin Patterson, Leongatha, Victoria, Australia. July 29, 2023. 4 people sat down to lunch. By nightfall, 3 of them were dying. Erin Patterson, a 49-year-old grandmother, invited her former in-laws to her home for a meal. Don Patterson, Gail Patterson, Gail's sister Heather Wilkinson, and Heather's husband Ian, a local pastor. She served them individual beef Wellingtons, neatly plated, carefully prepared. Within hours, all 4 guests were rushed to the hospital. The culprit, death cap mushrooms, one of the most lethal fungi on Earth. Heather Wilkinson died, Gail Patterson died, Don Patterson died, Ian Wilkinson survived, but his health was permanently destroyed. Authorities initially treated it as a tragic accident. Then the evidence started unraveling Patterson's story. She claimed she bought the mushrooms from a supermarket. Investigators proved that was a lie. Surveillance footage showed her disposing of a food dehydrator used to process the mushrooms. She handed over a factory reset phone when police came calling. The prosecution argued this lunch had been planned weeks in advance. Strained family relationships, financial disputes, growing resentment, not an accident, a calculated act of mass poisoning. Patterson pleaded not guilty throughout a 10-week trial that gripped Australia and drew global media attention. The jury rejected every word of her defense. On September 8, 2025, Supreme Court Justice Christopher Beale sentenced Erin Patterson to 3 concurrent life sentences for murder, plus additional time for attempted murder. The non-parole period, 33 years. Justice Beale called it an enormous betrayal of trust. As of February 2026, Patterson remains incarcerated in Victoria. She will not be eligible for parole until 2056, when she will be 82 years old. Case 2. Dallas Humber, Elk Grove, California, July 2022 to September 2024. From a quiet suburban home in California, a woman was orchestrating murder across 3 continents. Dallas Humber wasn't just a white supremacist. She was the architect of a global terror network called the Terror Collective, and she ran it from her living room. Between July 2022 and September 2024, Humber recruited followers worldwide. She provided step-by-step instructions for violent attacks. She celebrated when those attacks succeeded. A shooting at an LGBTQ+ bar in Slovakia, 2 killed. School shootings in Brazil, 4 dead. A stabbing outside a mosque in Turkey, 5 wounded. She never pulled a single trigger, but federal prosecutors said she designed every attack. Plots were also uncovered targeting energy infrastructure in New Jersey and Tennessee. Federal investigators spent years tracking her digital footprint across continents. Every message, every directive, every celebration of carnage was documented. When they finally came for her, the evidence was overwhelming. In August 2025, Humber pleaded guilty to soliciting hate crimes, soliciting the murder of federal officials, and providing material support to terrorists. On December 17, 2025, Judge Dina Coggins sentenced Dallas Humber to 30 years in federal prison. Assistant Attorney General Matthew Olson stated plainly that her incarceration makes the world safer. As of February 2026, Humber is serving her federal sentence. She will be in her 60s before she is eligible for release. Case 3. Gina Emanuel, Miami, Florida, 2017 to 2018. She was a trained nurse. She understood the human body, what keeps it alive and what ends it. When Gina Emanuel adopted 4 sisters, after years of fostering them, the community saw it as an act of love. What happened inside that home was the opposite. In 2018, 7-year-old Samaya became gravely ill, pneumonia and sepsis. Emanuel, with full medical knowledge of what that meant, refused to get help. Samaya died. When investigators examined her body, they found burns, wounds, and marks consistent with repeated physical abuse. The surviving sisters finally told the truth. They described being starved, being forced to consume waste, having their hands burned on a stove, being chained to furniture for hours, being made to stand for days as punishment. Emanuel showed nothing in court. No emotion, no remorse. Not even when 18-year-old Ayana stood before her and said, "Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. I wish you well in the abyss." On April 15, 2025, a jury convicted Gina Emanuel of first-degree murder and multiple counts of child abuse. Judge Christina Miranda sentenced her to life in prison plus 60 years. State Attorney Catherine Fernandez Rundle said, "No one could imagine a trained nurse would torture and starve children she was supposed to protect." As of February the 2026, Emanuel is serving her life sentence in Florida. She will never be released. Case 4. Sakina Thompson, Tamarac, Florida.
We find as follows as defendant in this case. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree.
July 13, 2022. At 5 a.m., a woman in a wide-brimmed hat, gloves, and a face covering stepped off a flight from New York and made her way to an apartment complex in South Florida. She had a purpose. She had a plan. And she had traveled over 1,000 miles to carry it out. Sakina Thompson's target was 23-year-old Kayla Hodgson. Their conflict? Thompson's ex-boyfriend had started dating Hodgson. Hodgson had blocked Thompson on social media. That was enough. Thompson used a fake rideshare account to reach the complex. She concealed her identity at every step. Then she found Hodgson inside her own home and attacked her. Investigators tied Thompson through flight records, phone data, surveillance footage, and recovered items linking her directly to the scene. When arrested in New York weeks later, the evidence against her was overwhelming. At trial, Thompson admitted to the killing but claimed self-defense, that Hodgson struck first, that she blacked out. The jury deliberated for roughly 1 hour before rejecting that story entirely. On December 1, 2025, Sakina Thompson was sentenced to life without parole for first-degree murder. The judge imposed the maximum sentence. Hodgson's family described a pain that would never fully heal, but said justice had finally been served. As of February 2026, Thompson is serving life without parole in Florida. Case 5. Hakyong Lee.
Your children were particularly vulnerable because of their age and their reliance upon you as their sole caregiver. We found you intended to kill your children, and also that while you were suffering from a depressive illness at the time, you knew that your actions were morally wrong.
Auckland, New Zealand, June 2018. Discovered August 2022. A family purchased the contents of an abandoned storage unit at auction. Inside 2 suitcases, they found the remains of 2 children, 8-year-old Yuna, 6-year-old Maya. Their mother, Hakyong Lee, had killed them in June 2018, 1 year after their father died. She administered a fatal overdose, placed their bodies inside the suitcases, and locked them in a storage unit. When the unit went to auction for non-payment 4 years later, a stranger made the discovery that launched a murder investigation. By then, Lee had fled to South Korea under a new identity. She was extradited in November 2022. At trial, she claimed severe depression had convinced her that killing her children was an act of mercy. But prosecutors pointed to the cover-up: the false identity, the disappearance, the 4 years of silence. She knew exactly what she had done. Digital evidence confirmed the children's accounts were active until June 27, 2018. After that date, every expense related to the children simply stopped. The jury took just 2 hours to convict. On November 26, 2025, Judge Jeffrey Vetting sentenced Hakyong Lee to life with a minimum of 17 years. He stated she could not bear having her children as reminders of the life she had lost. As of February 2026, Lee is serving her sentence in New Zealand. She will be eligible for parole consideration after 17 years. Case 6, Dabia Benord, Paris, France. October 2022, Paris, France. A 12-year-old girl named Lola entered her apartment building on an ordinary afternoon. Cameras captured her going in with a 27-year-old woman. 2 hours later, the woman left alone, struggling with heavy luggage. Lola's body was found concealed inside a plastic container. She had been taken to an apartment, subjected to prolonged violence, and killed. And the medical examiner's findings were unambiguous: asphyxiation, neck compression, and injuries consistent with sustained assault. Prosecutors called it calculated cruelty. The investigation moved quickly. Surveillance footage, witness accounts, and forensic evidence all pointed to Dabia Benord. The case became one of the most closely watched trials in France in years, not just because of the horror of the crime, but because of what it would mean for the defendant. Prosecutors pushed for the maximum. France rarely imposes life without parole. The country hadn't given that sentence to a woman since the mid-1990s. On October 24, 2025, a Paris court sentenced Benord to life without parole, making her the first woman in France to receive that sentence in roughly 3 decades. She asked for forgiveness in court. The judges ruled no remorse could outweigh what she had done. Lola's family said that while nothing brings their daughter back, the decision honored her memory. As of February 2026, Benord is incarcerated in France, serving life without the possibility of parole. Case 7, Sarah Hartsfield, Chambers County, Texas. January 15, 2023. A woman called 911 and said she'd woken to find her diabetic husband unresponsive. It looked like a medical emergency. The evidence made it look like something much darker. Joseph Hartsfield had type 1 diabetes. His wife, Sarah, told investigators she had been asleep when his condition worsened. But phone records told a different story. Data showed Sarah was active online nearly every hour through the night, contradicting her claim entirely. The autopsy confirmed Joseph died from toxic levels of insulin. Nurses who treated him testified that his blood sugar kept plummeting despite intervention, inconsistent with any accidental misuse of medication. The medical examiner concluded he had received a fatal, deliberate dose. Then, prosecutors introduced evidence of messages sent from Joseph's phone to Sarah's, transferring banking information and an Apple Legacy contact key sent while he was dying. She had also deleted messages and a video that reportedly showed Joseph in critical distress before she called for help. The trial also cast a shadow on her past. A former fiancé had died in a 2018 shooting initially ruled self-defense, a case that was reopened during these proceedings. The jury deliberated just 1 hour before returning a guilty verdict. On October 9, 2025, Sarah Hartsfield was sentenced to life in prison with a 30-year non-parole period and a $10,000 fine. As of February 2026, Hartsfield is incarcerated in Texas. She cannot be considered for parole for at least 30 years. We're halfway through 20 cases, spanning 6 countries and 3 continents. Every single one of these crimes happened in a real neighborhood, on a real street, maybe not unlike yours. I want to know, where in the world are you watching this right now? Drop your city and country in the comments below. I track every single one, and I want to see how far these stories actually travel. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on our future updates. Case 8, Fishia Scott, Washington, D.C., March 21st, 2017. A mother ran outside her home, screaming that her baby wasn't breathing. She flagged down a passing postal carrier, carrying 1-year-old rhythm fields. The child was cold, eyes fixed, already gone. Scott told investigators she hadn't seen her daughter since that morning. The autopsy told a completely different story. Rhythm had multiple blunt force injuries across her body, bruises, abrasions, and signs of oxygen deprivation. Most disturbing, 23 rib fractures. Some old, some fresh. This was not a single incident. This was repeated abuse over time. The death was ruled a homicide. Prosecutors argued no explanation existed for injuries of that nature and pattern other than deliberate, ongoing violence. The case moved slowly through the legal system, but the evidence against Scott never weakened. On June 11, 2025, a jury found Fishia Scott guilty of murdering her daughter. United States Attorney Janine Ferrispiro emphasized the prolonged suffering Rhythm endured before her death. On October 24, 2025, Scott was sentenced to 41 years in prison. As of February 2026, Fishia Scott is incarcerated and serving her 41-year sentence. She will be well into her 70s before any possibility of release. Case 9, Mong Jae-won, South Korea, February 10, 2025. After the final lesson of the day, a teacher told one of her students she had a book for her. The 8-year-old followed her teacher into a room. She was the last child still in the building. She was chosen for that reason alone. Mong Jae-won was a teacher at Kim Han-yeol's school. What she did inside that room with a knife she had purchased that same day sparked nationwide outrage in South Korea. The attack was not spontaneous. Police uncovered evidence that Won had researched methods of violence before carrying it out. She had a documented history of mental health struggles, including reported violent behavior toward colleagues. But the school had no knowledge of the full extent of her history. Won pleaded guilty at trial but requested psychiatric evaluation. Kim's family opposed it, calling it a legal tactic to reduce her sentence. Prosecutors pushed for the death penalty. On October 20th, 2025, the Daejeon District Court sentenced Mong Jae-won to life imprisonment. She must also wear an electronic tracking device for 30 years upon any future release. Kim Han-yeol's family announced intentions to appeal, seeking the maximum penalty available under South Korean law. As of February 2026, Won is serving a life sentence in South Korea. The family's appeal is ongoing. Case 10, Julia Deloney, Wellington, New Zealand, January 24, 2024. A 79-year-old woman named Helen Gregory was murdered inside her own home. The person who killed her was the one person in the world she should have been safest with, her daughter. Julia Deloney, 53, inflicted 75 separate injuries on her mother in what the court described as a prolonged, savage attack. Wounds consistent with a heavy, blunt object, possibly a vase that was never recovered. Blood was found smeared across hallway walls and throughout the bedroom where Helen's body was discovered. The defense claimed a third party was responsible. The evidence said otherwise. CCTV footage showed Deloney leaving the property that evening, then changing her clothing. The following morning, she was captured on camera disposing of a mystery bag into a passing rubbish truck. The prosecution argued the motive was financial. Deloney had made catastrophic cryptocurrency investments and had allegedly been stealing from her mother for some time. The killing, prosecutors said, was not a sudden act. It was the result of a relationship already corroded by desperation and deceit. Jurors saw crime scene photographs during the 4.5-week trial. They reached their verdict in just over a day. On September 5, 2025, Justice Peter Churchman sentenced Julia Deloney to life with a minimum non-parole period of 18 years. He cited Helen's age and vulnerability, the attack occurring in her own home, and Deloney's deliberate attempts to conceal the crime. As of February 2026, Deloney is incarcerated in New Zealand. Case 11, Kamora Hodes. Roseville, Michigan. June 13, 2022. A mother dropped her 22-month-old son off with a trusted babysitter. Kamora Hodes had watched Kyrie Starks before. His mother had no reason to worry. She never saw him alive again. When Kyrie's condition became critical inside Hodes' apartment, she called his mother and told her it was an allergic reaction to soap. Doctors discovered the real cause: blunt force trauma to the head. Kyrie's injuries were so severe that emergency surgery was required. He showed no brain activity. After nearly a week, he died. Investigators alleged Hodes had struck and thrown the toddler repeatedly. She had also admitted, in statements to police, to striking the child. Legal battles unfolded over which statements could be used at trial. The Michigan Court of Appeals ruled one inadmissible and one admissible. The admissible statement went before the jury. On July 31, 2025, after 6 days of trial and just over 2 hours of deliberation, a Macomb County jury convicted Hodes of felony murder and first-degree child abuse. On November 4, 2025, she was sentenced to life without parole for the murder, plus 15 to 40 years for child abuse. Prosecutor Peter Lucido stated the sentence reflected the severity of the crime and the need to protect society's most vulnerable. As of February 2026, Kamora Hodes is serving life without parole in Michigan. Case 12, Stacy Rodriguez, Greeley, Colorado. October 2, 2021. 3 people met at a bar. The night seemed casual. By morning, one of them was dead and a house was on fire. Stacy Rodriguez, 23, and a woman named Hosanna Varela met Christopher Dickerson at a local bar. They went back to his home. Behind closed doors, the evening turned fatal. Rodriguez attacked Dickerson with a knife, stabbing him multiple times. Then, she and Varela set fire to the living room in an attempt to destroy the evidence. Fire investigators made a critical finding. There was no smoke in Dickerson's lungs. He was already dead before the flames were lit. At trial, Rodriguez admitted to starting the fire, but tried to shift blame onto her co-defendant. She also claimed self-defense, alleging Dickerson became aggressive. Prosecutors dismantled that account by pointing to the number and placement of the wounds, the absence of any evidence of a struggle, and Rodriguez's behavior after the killing. The jury rejected her version entirely. Dickerson's father told the judge that his son did not deserve to die for extending hospitality to 2 women he had just met. Rodriguez was convicted of first-degree murder, arson, tampering with a body, and burglary. She was sentenced to life without parole for the murder, plus 32 years for arson and 12 years for tampering, all running consecutively. Prosecutors called her diabolical, despicable, and a continuing threat. As of February 2026, Rodriguez is serving life without parole in Colorado. Case 13, Carrie Jones, Laurel, Nebraska. August 4, 2022. 4 people were shot dead in a quiet Nebraska town. 2 homes were set on fire to hide the evidence. The woman who stood trial didn't pull the trigger, but prosecutors said she was the one who started it. Carrie Jones encouraged her husband Jason to murder Jean Twyford over comments she considered inappropriate. But what her husband did that night went far beyond one killing. Jean Twyford, Janet Twyford, their daughter Dana, neighbor Michelle Ebling, all shot. Both homes burned, 4 lives erased in a single evening. Investigators pieced the case together through forensics and witness testimony. Pretrial publicity was so intense the case had to be moved to a different county. At trial, Carrie Jones reportedly laughed at moments while the victims' families sat in the same room, waiting for justice. In August 2025, a jury found her guilty of first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and being an accessory to the remaining deaths. On November 20th, 2025, Judge Brian Meismer sentenced Carrie Jones to life without parole, plus consecutive terms adding up to decades more. Prosecutors called her diabolical and a continuing threat to public safety. Her husband, Jason, awaited a 3-judge panel decision on the death penalty, expected in April 2026. As of February 2026, Carrie Jones is incarcerated and serving life without parole in Nebraska. Case 14. Michelle Hilliard, Sash, Columbus, Ohio, May 26, 2021. 4-year-old Bryson Brown was staying with his father's girlfriend while his dad was away. It was supposed to be temporary. It became fatal. Michelle Hilliard was responsible for Bryson the day he was found unresponsive. Court records revealed she had struck him repeatedly with a board. The force sent him falling down the stairs. Hours passed before his father came home, found him, and rushed him to the hospital. Bryson did not survive. The cause of death, multiple blunt force trauma. What investigators uncovered next was deeply disturbing. Hilliard had a prior conviction for abusing 2 of her own children in 2004. She had served time. Every one of her children had been removed from her custody as a result of abuse. Despite that history, she was in a position to care for another child. After Bryson died, Hilliard sent messages acknowledging what she had done. When police interviewed her, she reportedly said, "I don't care. I'm confessing I did it." The jury convicted her on September 12, 2025, just 4 days after trial began, finding her guilty of aggravated murder, assault, and endangering children. On September 23, 2025, Judge Andy Miller sentenced Hilliard to 25 years to life, with credit for time already served. As of February 2026, Hilliard is incarcerated in Ohio. Case 15. Virginia Marie Smith, Sisonville, West Virginia, April 2021. In the spring of 2021, 35-year-old Cheyenne Johnson disappeared from Jackson County, West Virginia. Days later, her body was recovered from a well. She had been shot and attacked multiple times. Investigators turned their focus to Virginia Marie Smith and her romantic partner, Michael Smith, unrelated by blood, connected by the crime. Authorities alleged both were involved in Cheyenne's murder and in concealing her body. Virginia admitted to firing the fatal shot. She claimed Michael had instructed her to do it. In February 2023, Virginia entered a guilty plea with one condition: she would testify against Michael. That testimony proved pivotal. In October 2025, Michael was convicted of second-degree murder. With Michael's case resolved, Virginia faced her own sentencing. On December 2, 2025, Judge Kenneth Ballard sentenced Virginia Marie Smith to life with mercy, the mandatory sentence under her plea agreement, plus 1 to 5 years for concealing a body and 10 years for use of a firearm. all running consecutively. Judge Ballard made his personal position clear on the record. He did not believe Smith deserved mercy. Under West Virginia law, life with mercy means parole eligibility after 15 years, granted in recognition of her cooperation. Cheyenne Johnson's family delivered emotional statements. Virginia expressed remorse and attributed her actions to substance use. As of February 2026, Virginia Marie Smith is incarcerated in West Virginia. Case 16, Chelsea Perkins, Alexandria, Virginia, March 6, 2021. Chelsea Perkins drove more than 300 miles from her home in Alexandria, Virginia. She brought a loaded firearm. She had someone specific in mind. The target was 31-year-old Matthew Dunmer. They had known each other previously. In 2017, Perkins had accused Dunmer of assault, a claim that was investigated and closed due to insufficient evidence. Whatever was still burning inside her 4 years later drove her across state lines. After meeting at a vacation rental, Perkins drove Dunmer on March 6th into the remote wilderness of Cuyahoga Valley National Park. They hiked off trail, past a cemetery, through ravines, into the woods, where Perkins shot him in the head and left him there. Hikers discovered his body days later. By then, Perkins had driven to Michigan, where she got a noose tattoo on her forearm before returning home to Virginia. GPS data, ballistics, surveillance footage, and DNA evidence all led directly to her. Investigators also recovered a deleted note that appeared to be a staged end-of-life message, suggesting the possibility that Perkins had anticipated what would follow. Multiple 9mm firearms were recovered from her residence. Perkins pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and using a firearm during a violent crime on federal property. In September 2025, she was sentenced to 270 months, 22.5 years, plus 5 years of supervised release and $600,000 in restitution. As of February 2026, Chelsea Perkins is incarcerated in federal custody. Case 17, Margot Lewis, North Liberty, Iowa, June 2024. Laura Say was a 35-year-old DJ and crisis counselor, someone who spent her professional life helping people through the worst moments of theirs. In June 2024, she was found dead inside a crashed vehicle on Interstate 90 near Rochester, Minnesota. Her body was wrapped in bedding, covered with a tarp, and concealed in the back seat. When deputies reached the scene, they found Margot Lewis sitting calmly on a lawn chair in the median. Investigators traced the timeline back to Say's Minneapolis apartment. Lewis had flown in from the East Coast days earlier. Prosecutors established that Say was killed in her own bed, a fact that triggered enhanced charges under Minnesota law, which treats a person's home as a protected zone. Lewis stabbed Say, then wrapped her body and transported it nearly 2 hours before the crash exposed everything she had tried to hide. At sentencing, Lewis maintained her innocence and said she had loved Say. The judge noted the specific brutality of the attack and the profound violation of trust it represented. On September 23, 2025, a jury convicted Lewis of second-degree murder. On November 20, 2025, she was sentenced to 40 years in prison with credit for time served, and restitution was ordered. As of February 2026, Margot Lewis is incarcerated in Minnesota, serving her 40-year sentence. Case 18, Emiah Bailey, Washington City, Utah, June 18, 2024. Just after 7 p.m., shots rang out inside a home on Chinook Drive. Officers arrived to find 2 people dead, shot multiple times. Joseph Bailey and Gail Bailey, their daughter Mia, was gone. A manhunt was launched. Hours later, officers found Mia Bailey nearby. She reportedly retrieved a handgun. placed it to her head, then walked into brush as authorities established containment. After a prolonged SWAT standoff, she surrendered. In post-arrest interviews, Bailey gave an account that disturbed even seasoned investigators. She described arriving at her parents' home and immediately shooting her mother, then her father, when he moved toward her. She told officers she continued firing after they had already fallen. When asked why, she said she wanted to make sure they were dead. She allegedly added that she hated them and that she would do it again. In October 2025, Bailey was ruled mentally competent to stand trial. She entered a guilty and mentally ill plea, acknowledging severe mental health struggles while accepting legal responsibility for both killings. The state did not seek the death penalty. On December 19, 2025, Judge Keith Barnes sentenced Mia Bailey to 2 consecutive terms of 25 years to life for aggravated murder, plus up to 5 years for aggravated assault. He described the crime as chilling and emphasized the lasting damage to her family and community. As of February 2026, Bailey is incarcerated in Utah. Case 19, Olivia Munoz, Mathis, Texas. December 19, 2023. A mother called the police saying she had woken to find her infant daughter unresponsive. 7-month-old Hazel was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead. At first, it appeared to be a tragic medical emergency. Then, the autopsy results came back. Medical examiners found multiple arm fractures and signs of repeated physical trauma. The death was ruled a homicide. As investigators pressed for answers, Munoz admitted the truth. She had injured her daughter on 3 separate occasions and never sought medical attention for any of them. During interviews, Munoz acknowledged she had felt anger toward Hazel, anger rooted in issues with the child's father. Hazel's siblings showed no signs of abuse. Hazel alone bore the full weight of that rage. Munoz was initially arrested on injury to a child charges. When the autopsy results confirmed the pattern of abuse, the charge was upgraded to capital murder. She was pregnant at the time of her arrest and held on a bond of $1.1 million. On October 24, 2025, Olivia Munoz pleaded guilty to capital murder. The judge imposed 2 life sentences. San Patricio County officials credited the coordinated efforts of the district attorney's office, Texas Rangers, and the local law enforcement in securing the conviction. As of February 2026, Munoz is serving 2 life sentences in Texas. She will never be released. Case 20, Jamie Michelle Bradley Brunn, St. Helena Island, South Carolina, May 19, 2023. In the early morning hours, a teenage girl dialed 911 and said something no child should ever have to say. "My mom is having a mental episode and I think she might have killed my little sister. I need an ambulance and police enforcement here as soon as possible." What that 16-year-old girl had just survived and what she had just stopped was almost incomprehensible. Her mother, Jamie Michelle Bradley Brune, had woken 6-year-old Mai, told her to undress, carried her to the bathroom, and held her underwater until she drowned. Then she dressed the child's body in a funeral dress and placed her on a bed. Then she went to the bathroom a second time, and tried to do it again, this time to her 8-year-old daughter. The child screamed. The 16-year-old heard her sister's cries, intervened physically, and fought her mother off. Then she called 911. Deputy Solicitor Mary Jones was direct at sentencing. She planned it. She knew what she was doing. She held her daughter under the water. There is no excuse. Sheriff P.J. Tanner publicly praised the teenager's courage for saving her sister's life. On December 19, 2025, Judge Marvin Dukes sentenced Bradley Brune to 50 years for murder and 30 years for attempted murder, running concurrently. As of February 2026, Bradley Brune is incarcerated in South Carolina. 20 women, 24 verdicts, nurses, mothers, teachers, caregivers, people trusted with the most vulnerable lives imaginable. In 2025, courts on 6 continents delivered answers for their victims. But for the families left behind, no sentence erases what was taken. The names in this video were real people. The pain is real. The courage it took to face these crimes in court and to survive them is real. If these stories matter to you, subscribe to Capital True Crime. Share this video so these victims are not forgotten. And stay vigilant, because the most dangerous threats are often the ones closest to home. This has been Capital True Crime. We'll see you in the next one.